tonight we are going to talk about how to have those conversations about these tough topics to make sure that people are informed and aware, and that you can try to persuade people who you care about, to come on over to share your values and to recognize what is happening in the country. So I'm going to bring up Jess. Jess is a consultant with Red, Wine, and Blue, and we are always so happy to have her. She has 15 years of political campaign experience and over a decade in media, providing strategic communications to organizations, candidates, and people who are just out there doing good. She's a regular on-air expert. I know many of you may have seen her on CNN. She had a Sirius XM radio show called Signal Boost with Zerlina Maxwell as the co-host. She writes about politics. So, like I said, CNN, Wall Street Journal, Elle, Refinery 29. She's all over the place. So, Jess, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to jump off and leave it up to you right now.
Thank you so much, Julie and Julie. And hi, all 842 of you. This is amazing. It is actually now 20 years that I have been working in politics. 20 years at every level from school board to United States president. And actually, that's not in the order that you would expect it to be. I did the presidential election before I realized that everything that mattered was as local as it got, which is what happened after 2016, and started paying close attention to school board races, to city municipals, to state legislative races, and to the kind of relational organizing work that you all are doing. Thank you so much for doing truly what is the thing that matters in this moment. We are in a time of great distrust, let's say. There's not a lot of institutional trust. There's not a lot of social trust. What there is trust in our own networks, trust in our own friends and families, our neighbors, our communities. And that is where you sharing your viewpoint and your information and your passion with the folks who already know and love you is just truly the most important thing you can do. But those conversations can still be a little daunting. So we're going to go through it tonight. I'm going to run through some slides that will suggest when to engage, when not to engage, how to engage if you decide to. And then I'm going to spend most of my time taking all of your questions because you have amazing questions. And I know that there were a ton of questions sent in. So I want to get to that as quickly as possible. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. So table setting. I want you to remember that you are the majority. These issues are called controversial by the media. They are made controversial by the extremists who want them to be seen as wedge issues. But the truth is, most of the issues that you're going to weigh in on as a member of Red, Wine, and Blue, or as a member of your community, are issues that the vast majority of people already agree with you on. When it comes to reproductive rights, the reason why they have to resort to disinformation campaigns is because they can't win if they don't. The vast majority of Americans absolutely support legal abortion. That number goes between like 60 and 75%, depending on how you ask the question. The number that never changes is the number of people who support total abortion bans. That number is always in the single digits. So we can tell that the extremists have a deeply unpopular position because of the way they run away from it, because of the way they lie about our position. And as frustrating as those things are, it is important to remember that disinformation campaigns happen because you won on the merits. So when abortion rights are on the ballot, we saw this from 2022 until last year, they tend to win. Even in really red states, you don't get there with under 50% of folks agreeing with you. So just a little grounding before we talk about how to have the conversations is a reminder that the people we're having the conversations with are likely to be with us. On LGBTQ plus issues, marriage equality, support for it is at an all-time high. It's never been higher. That is why you do not see extremists attacking it. They would if they could, but they know how unpopular that is. That was very much not the case just 10 years ago. I think it's really important to look at these stats about folks supporting trans people in schools, in society. The bottom one here is from the Wall Street Journal, which is definitely not a bastion of progressive polling. It is a leaning conservative paper. And they found that 65% of Americans should be, 65% of Americans say being transgender should be accepted by society. 64% strongly believe that trans people should be protected from discrimination. Now, I'm pretty sure that if we said trans kids and protected from bullying, that number would be even higher. It would be 85, 90%. The truth is, the majority of Americans, just because they don't understand something, doesn't mean that they're afraid of it. And we see that in research around this particular issue. Not very many people know a trans person personally. That doesn't mean that they want to see them discriminated against. This is a thing that extremists get wrong. They think that we all think the same way they do, and we very much do not. Again, book bans are just wildly unpopular. I'm sure for those of you who have had these conversations, you have seen people's eyes light up when you talk about this. Nobody wants books banned from their kids' schools. The vast majority of people want US history taught as part of a public education, and they do not support banning books that are critical of United States history. And of course, sex ed enjoys overwhelming support. 98% of voters in high school, a little bit less than that in middle school. You don't see 98% for like clean air and water. So just to remember that on a lot of these issues, gun violence prevention, that we are just repeatedly told are controversial and divisive, the truth is the vast majority of us really agree on it. We might not know that we agree when we start this conversation, but our values are in fact aligned. What is not aligned is the media that we listen to, and that might really change how you approach an issue. This also might change how you would approach an issue. This is the disinformation campaign. This is what is happening. So we all agree. What's the problem? This is the problem. The problem is some outside groups and politicians are heavily invested in confusing and scaring parents in order to score partisan points and gain political power. I'm spelling that out because I want you all to feel free to spell that out. It is disorienting when you hear a bunch of lies that don't correspond with your reality. Having that explained to you often helps. And people know that there are outside groups that are like invested in scaring them. So pointing out that this is about scoring partisan points, gaining political power, that's just a really good way of separating the extremists from your communities. They're thinking about partisanship and political power. You are thinking about kids in schools. This little array of logos at the bottom there is a few of these groups that you might wind up seeing. They are all funded by the same folks. This is all the same sort of extremist, right-wing, radical agenda that we have seen in this country for decades. They stand up different pieces to sort of lend a veneer of credibility. The Heritage Foundation is often used to be described as, a conservative think tank. This is what came up with Project 2025. Moms for Liberty, of course, is called Moms for Liberty. It's supposed to sound like a grassroots movement. Of course, it is a nationally funded political movement. Lots of these folks, the Medical Institute for Sexual Health will stand up somebody who purports to be a doctor to provide science that is easily debunked by any other medical association. These are folks that you're probably familiar with at this point, but this is what's happening. This is why that majority doesn't feel like a majority. I use a stadium analogy where if you walk into a stadium and you hear everybody's cheering, but there's one section of booing people, right? A person walking into the stadium can pretty quickly figure out what's going on there. Everybody's cheering, those guys aren't happy, got it. But if you take the booing section and you give them all megaphones and then you spread them out throughout the stadium, if I walk in, it becomes pretty it just sounds like chaos, right? It doesn't I can't tell who's got the numbers on their side, and that is the point of this well-funded campaign. It is to make a minority look and act and feel like it's a lot more powerful than it actually should be. So how do we fight it? Number one, and we're going to start with the hardest part. This is the hardest part of the whole thing. Don't repeat disinformation. We talked about a lot about this when in the presidential election last year, we heard that absolutely disgusting rumor about, it's not even a rumor, just a disgusting lie about the Haitian community in Ohio. And everybody repeated it because it was so absurd. It was so ridiculous, that what we wound up talking about was whether or not that thing was happening in that community, which had absolutely nothing to do with the very important conversation that was happening on that stage. It had nothing to do with Trump's agenda, nothing to do with Project 2025, nothing to do with what Kamala Harris wanted to do for the country. So that was just sort of the clearest example of what happens when you repeat disinformation, even to debunk it. You wind up having the wrong conversation. It also has the unfortunate effect of forever linking the stuff in your brain. So even though I know that that is a lie about the Haitian immigrant community in Ohio, now those things are connected, and that is unfortunate and sad, but a really, really clear illustration of why we do not repeat the disinformation. You can just say no. You can just say that's not true. Instead of saying something like, no one's taking your guns away, people taking your guns away is disinformation. No Democrat has ever proposed or been able to do that. So instead of saying no one's taking your guns away, consider saying something like, we're just looking for sane background checks. This is about common sense gun safety legislation. See how I answered the question without talking about it? And if you get pressed and it's, boy, are you avoiding my question? Are people taking guns away? No, of course not. What we're doing is asking for background checks and common sense measures to keep everybody safe. So you can address the disinformation, just do not get caught up in that debate about it. You're not going to ignore the disinformation. You want to be able to tell people there is a lot of bad information out there. I want to set the record straight. Help people understand what's going on. Explaining the motivations, talking about the fact that Trump lied about an immigrant community in Ohio to score partisan points. That would have been a great way to address what happened on that stage. It would have kept it on his lies. It would have kept it on his partisanship. It would have left that community out of it, and it would have had the right conversation after. So talk about the motivations. People are trying to scare you because they want to win. They want money. They want elected office. They want power. But this second bullet is going to help you transition a lot of your conversations. And yes, you can get these slides. Don't feel like you need to write it down. But if you were going to write one down, this would be the one I would tell you to. We believe our kids are more important than politics. If anybody ever wants to have a conversation about Donald Trump or whatever is going on in Washington, you can get back to what matters, which is what's happening in your community, with we believe our kids are more important than politics. The person you're talking to actually probably agrees with you on that. So if you deliver it, they're gonna nod. That's going to take you to a much more productive conversation, much more productive ground. Feel free to stand up for your beliefs. I'm not at all saying to find common ground by getting squishy about the stuff you believe in. Inclusivity is a huge one, this first bullet. Every single one of our schools includes LGBTQ kids. Every school, every public school, every private school, every Catholic school, every single school. They all deserve an environment that treats them with respect. And multiple studies show, if that's not enough for you, that even the kids who do not identify as LGBTQ are safer in an environment that treats all kids with respect. So even your straight kid has a better time and is less likely to be bullied in a school where LGBTQ kids are treated with dignity. It helps everybody when we are kind and welcoming to everybody. The second one, gun violence, obviously, it's the leading cause of death for children. Please feel free to lean into your passion on this issue. It cannot be overstated. And of course, reproductive freedom. I think we've all been talking about this issue a lot in the last few years. Everybody knows and loves someone who's had an abortion. Sharing your story, talking about women having the freedom to decide, talking about how we decide, not politicians. Stand up for those beliefs. The person you're talking to likely shares them in some way, and by being honest and then listening for the reaction, you're going to have a way to start talking about things. That's not the case with everybody. Sometimes we're going to call them the opposition. Like, these are the people who, they are Moms for Liberty members, right? They are the extremist school board candidates. They are never going to change their mind. Likely their paycheck depends on it. It's okay to let them go. It is very sad when those people are members of our own family, right? They're just super entrenched. They have been mainlining this brand of news for years and years and years now. There is just no way. We can talk about how to have those conversations, but that work is a very long game. That is the work of years and decades to reach those folks because we love them and we care about them and we don't want to stop. That is not what I'm talking about here. We are not going to have these sorts of conversations, these relational organizing conversations around local issues with folks who we know are like this, we know are the opposition. We're just not going to engage in that. And part of it is because you're not going to change their mind. Part of it is because you don't have to. You saw those stats about how we are the majority. If the 2% of people who don't want sex ed in high school, are real loud about it, that's okay. It's okay. We don't need 100%. So it is okay to let some of those go. Your energy and mental health is an enormous resource and really needs to be jealously protected. So that the time that you spend frustratingly arguing with somebody who you know is never really going to see your point, that's just going to deplete your energy resources for all of those great conversations that you can have with people who do agree with you and simply don't know that there's a fight on their hands in their community. That's where we want you to put your energy. The only reason to ever have a conversation with somebody who you know is the entrenched opposition is because other people are watching. And this is only like if this is part of your personality, I kind of like a confrontation. So, if I think I have the opportunity to set the record straight in public, I might take it. That's the only reason why I would engage with somebody who was the opposition. And even then, I would know that my goal there was not to change that person's mind. My goal was to say the good information in front of everybody else. So I would keep my audience in mind. So that's how we're going to treat the opposition. And we're going to do that because our own mental health really, really matters. And banging your head against a wall really hurts. So the people that we want to focus on, these are people who they might, it might seem like they disagree with you. They are people who have heard disinformation. They are frightened by the stuff that they have heard. The first thing we're going to do is find common ground. So if somebody is coming to you with concerns about what's being taught in school, well, they care about kids, right? They have concerns about kids. You do too. You guys share that concern. So saying, look, I hear where you're coming from. I am also very concerned that kids get age-appropriate material to help them succeed in the world. They're going to nod. Now you are talking about how to set kids up for success, as opposed to who believes what and which one of you is right. So the first thing you're going to do is hear that concern. It might be a public safety concern, which you share. I'm sure you are also concerned about safety in your community. You might come to a different conclusion about it, but start from the common ground, the concern that you both share. So once we've established that we both share this concern, instead of saying, but I believe the exact opposite of you, I'm going to say, I share your concern about kids getting age-appropriate material in class. I really do. That's why I support comprehensive sex ed, or that's why I want to make sure that they're taught accurate US history. I care a lot about kids getting set up for success just like you do. That's why I want to make sure that LGBTQ kids have an education too, and that all kids are safer from bullying. So we're going to find common ground. That's why we believe the things that we believe. The allied, this is where you talk to somebody and they're just like, yes, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you. Where do I sign up? The three things you're going to do here are to make it urgent, right? We live in a time of many intersecting crises, macro and micro. We've all got a lot on our plates and the world has a lot on its plate. So how are you going to make something urgent? Like, why is this something that this person who agrees with you should take an hour out of their weekend to do right now? Make it local. This is really like, there are a lot of people who follow the news but have no idea what impact it's going to have on their own community. You can be an enormous source of education there. And then recruit. Get them to come to the next Red Wine and Blue meeting. Get them to come to one of these webinars. Make sure that they're talking to their friends moving forward. When we find somebody who's on our page, it's all systems go. So I want you to remember, there's a couple takeaways before we go to Q&A. Stay focused. It is about your town, not Washington, D.C. It is about your kids, not political parties, and ask questions. You know, one of the great ways to make sure that you're not in a debate is to keep asking. So what is it you're concerned about? Where did you hear those concerns? What makes you concerned about that? There's so much bad information out there. What are you hearing? It's a great way to put you on even ground and make everybody feel comfortable. And then remember, saying no or that's not true and then moving on to the facts is how we handle disinformation. We do not get caught in a back and forth on the disinformation. We're going to remember to find common ground. We share their concern. That's why. And we're going to acknowledge the strategy. We're going to acknowledge the bad actors. There are people out there who are lying to you because they want to scare you so they can achieve political power. It's sad, but it's true. But our kids are more important than politics. So I'm going to stop sharing and take questions.
Well, actually, what I would love to do is start with some of the questions that got submitted. You guys submitted a lot of questions. Like I had to print like it's like 3 pages back and forth of questions. So, but a lot of them were similar. You guys had a lot of the same concerns. So I'm going to start with the questions you all submitted, but keep dropping your questions in the chat. And Julie Collins is kind of getting those together, and we will ask those as well. But to start with, one of the biggest things that people were asking Jess is just this is very triggering. I can't keep my cool sometimes when I'm having these conversations. So, I guess any advice on that and like on how to approach these conversations, what the mindset needs to be, and why losing your cool and screaming at the person is really not productive.
Yeah, I have a goal, right? This is about like not engaging with the opposition. If a conversation makes you want to scream, you don't have to have that conversation. It is okay. Like I think we think about like we know because like we're right, like the science is on our side, the facts are on our side, and the kids are healthier and happier if the things we want to have happen. We sort of think that we can get everybody, right? Because they just need to hear the right stat. They just need to hear the right fact or the right story, and then they'll get it. And that is simply not the case. I wish it were. It frustrates me greatly that it's not. But if a conversation is going to make you want to scream, don't have that conversation. It is okay to let that go. If it's somebody who is frustrating, but you think you can actually get there, remember the goal. Like, remember why you're having this conversation. You are not expecting them to, in that moment, say, "You're right, I was wrong." That will never happen. Admitting that we were wrong is one of the most difficult cognitive things the human brain does. Saying it out loud is damn near impossible. So I want you, before a conversation that you think is going to be tough like that, to remember why you're doing it and what you think a win is. A win is probably the door staying open to further conversation. A win probably looks like, I appreciate where we're disagreeing, but I really appreciate that you're talking to me about it, and I hope that we're able to continue. I know we both care about the kids. That you should walk away from that feeling 10 feet tall. But you could feel really small if what you thought you were going to do was change somebody's mind. So keep a goal in mind. Do not bang your head into the wall. There are a lot of people who are kind of just dying to hear this information and get involved and spend your time and energy there.
I totally agree with that. And I do think we have to set that expectation that, like you just said, someone's not going to suddenly be like, oh my God, I had no idea. You are completely right. That's just never going to happen. So expectations are great. I also say that it is, like you just said, very hard to change someone to change their mind. It's hard to admit that maybe you were misled or you were wrong. And I just want to quickly throw out an example that happened in my life that someone I know, friend of a friend, um, woman was a hardcore MAGA person, and she heard about the cuts to the National Institute of Health. She had a family member die of cancer, and it got to her, but she wasn't quite sure. But it was an opening because it was her own. I'm not questioning. Like it was it that, and I think that's an important point. But sometimes with people, they have to come around on their own, and I don't know how you feel about that, Jess, but
Yeah, absolutely. And never force them to say it out loud. if you sense that somebody's coming, or like if you're having this conversation with your friend and all of a sudden she is saying that she really dislikes the NIH cuts to funding, she heard about the cancer thing, but this other stuff actually sounds like it's pretty bad too, and we're not going to make her say that she didn't believe that last year. We're just going to appreciate that she's where she is, and count that as and count that absolutely as a huge win. It is one of the most fun and frustrating things, is to hear people say that they were there all along and we had a goal and we accomplished the goal, and so we're going to be good with that.
I know you've already talked about disinformation, but that was one thing that people were really concerned about, is that number one, it's so hard to have conversations with people who are just constantly throwing disinformation at you. And I know you've kind of addressed it, but the other concern that people had is that sometimes whoever you're talking to is throwing out disinformation that you've never even heard before. Like, this is the newest, latest, greatest thing on Fox News. How do you kind of keep your cool and not feel really flustered by that?
I don't know about that, but let me tell you what I do know. I'm more focused on our community than I am in what I'm hearing about Fox News. That's interesting, and I'm happy to look into it, but right now our kids need X. I wouldn't, if I've never heard of something, I can't say it's a lie, right? I can be pretty sure it's a lie, but I can't with confidence say that's not true. So instead, I'm going to say, I haven't heard that, or I'll look into it, or that's interesting. You could ask why they care about that issue. Like, what is that, there are other ways to handle that. But if somebody just keeps peppering you with disinformation, that is not a conversation you need to have. That is one you can let go. If somebody has heard a thing, but is otherwise engaging with you on your community and the things that are happening, in your schools and in your state legislatures, great. But if sometimes a big part of a disinformation campaign is actually wasting your time. Like, that is actually a goal of the campaign. They are not trying to change your mind. They are not trying to get you to believe what they believe. They are trying to demoralize you and stop you from doing your work. They're trying to make sure that your truth can't get out because your truth is more powerful than their lies. So when you engage with the disinformation, even to knock it down and knock it down and knock it down and knock it down, that's 5 minutes that you have spent not saying the facts that people need to hear. And that was the point. Like, they weren't actually trying to win the argument. They were trying, like, when I get, every now and then, I live in a swing district now. I'm in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley. And so I will get a phone call on my cell phone from the Republican Party asking me what I think about X, Y, or Z. And I keep them on the phone for as long as humanly possible. I am the most undecided, swingiest, lowest information voter you have ever heard of. I want to know everything because my goal is to waste their time. I am a disinformation agent in that moment. I'm doing it for good, but I am lying to that person on the phone and I am stopping them from making other calls. Don't let them do that to you.
Perfect. And thank you for that's great. We appreciate that. All right. So the other thing people mentioned a lot was just, I'm not an expert. I don't understand school funding. I don't understand what's going on in Ukraine. Um, so there is that feeling of like, I don't think I can have an intelligent conversation because I don't know, I'm not an expert on all of these topics. Do you need to be an expert to have?
100% no. And please, if you have any imposter syndrome, I urge you to watch any 5 minutes of any congressional hearing ever. Just cure your imposter syndrome right up. These men are not experts and they are happy to weigh in. What you're going to do is talk about your own experience, right? I'm not a foreign policy expert, but I feel deeply about Ukraine. I feel that way because I grew up, in a post World War II America where we were talking about democracies versus fascism, and so I just have this knee-jerk response to authoritarians, bigfooting on somebody else's territory. I think that's wrong, and I think America has a role to play in stopping the big bad guys in the world because we're the big good guys. There, I just gave you my opinion. That was like foreign policy fact free. right? But you're able to have a conversation about it. You just have to trust that your feelings sort of matter enough for the conversation. And I've seen this go by a couple of times and it always comes up, so I'm just going to do it here. You do not need to cite facts and figures. If you are saying, but the Wall Street Journal said that 65% of Americans, you have already lost. You are not making that. We all know that it's an emotional resonance that makes a case. So citing the stat that 65% of Americans think that trans adults should not be discriminated against is great, but that doesn't do nearly as much as talking about how kids in school need to be treated with respect so that everybody can be free from bullying. Like, if you're citing stats and figures, you are very divorced from emotional reality. You're also not talking like a person. In normal conversation, we don't do that. And this should be normal conversation. This needs to not feel like a lecture, not feel like academia. Should feel like two people talking. So you can know the stats and figures if you're somebody who wants to keep that, but don't feel like that's a part of your messaging solution. It's not.
Yep. And I see in the chat people dropping like sources on Substack. Obviously, Heather Cox Richardson, we all love. But there are so many great people who are informing. So if there's a topic you care about, you can definitely find someone to follow, to learn about. Go to Red, Wine, and Blue's website. We have all kinds of resources and guides and messaging and things to just help you feel more confident. But I love what Jess just said, because you do not have to be an expert. It really is based on like what you feel and what you believe, and you should stand up for those beliefs. And I also back you up on the go watch your state legislature. That is how I realized that I was way smarter than a lot of people who were elected, because I watched the state hearing here in Ohio and I was shocked when I was first getting involved in politics. So, all right. So let's step away from the MAGA relative or neighbor. So maybe someone who's just not paying any attention to politics. It's that friend who's just kids, work, running around, and they're just really disengaged. How do we start these conversations? How do we start maybe working on a little bit of persuasion, a little bit of informing, so that we can get them where we want them to be come election time?
Well, you know these people, so you know their concerns, and eventually they're going to talk about something that has a school board, state legislative, etc. Like, are you raising kids together? You will be talking about things that are openings for this kind of stuff. If they ever express an economic concern, that is an opening for this conversation. If you're just talking about general, hopes and dreams for your kids, that is an opening for this conversation. If something new is happening in your school, did you hear that they banned this book? Did you ever read To Kill a Mockingbird when you were a kid? Did you hear that they banned it? Like, there are, educating them about the things that are the closest to them is probably the best. Especially super urgent stuff. They're debating something, or they're voting on something next week that would get rid of arts in school. Or meeting them at a concern that you know that they have, whether that's economic or social, reproductive, etc. But just, I would think about it, there are a lot more you don't have to be necessarily discussing politics to have an opening to talk about this stuff.
I'm not sure if there's a different answer to this, but a lot of people did ask it, that they get really frustrated with the people who are like agree to disagree, or the what about isms, and the flat out like both sides are doing this type thing. Is there anything different in the way to address that, or do you think basically the things
I
you've
would
covered?
dismiss all of the both sides as politics. We're not here to defend capital D Democrats. That's not a thing we have to do. We can defend our values. We can protect kids. We can stand up for marginalized communities. We can vote for capital D Democrats if that's what we decide to do. But having a partisan fight, so like both sides do X, you know what? I don't really care about politics. I care about our kids. I think our kids are more important than politics. Of course, I hear things on both sides that I don't like, but that's just not what keeps me up at night. What keeps me up at night is the fact that one side is trying to get rid of public education altogether. That really bothers me because my kids agree, and then you're off talking about public education. That was the both sides, but there was a good one that was before the both sides that is a frustrating one we get every now and then.
Agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree. I hate agree to disagree. Yeah, it's what I mean, it's an end to a conversation, and the person does get to end the conversation. Agree to disagree is often, and I no longer have anything to say. I've run out. It can mean you've won this conversation. And I am never going to admit that, especially not in front of you right now. So, what I'm going to say is agree to disagree because I want to stop having this conversation. So, agree to disagree is a conversation stopper. You respect that because we're not forcing anybody to have any conversations, but like, clock it. Like, do you think maybe you got the agree to disagree because you actually got a foot in the door? So when you hear agree to disagree, yes, I appreciate that. And, frankly, I appreciate you like just having the conversation to disagree with me. I really enjoy hearing other viewpoints, and I hope that we can keep talking, especially about the stuff that matters most. Like, take agree to disagree as an opening. Which is very hard for me. I just want to be like, what do you mean? Disagree about human rights? Do we like, and like, no, that's not helpful. so, so remembering your goals.
Keep Jess in your head, everybody, so that when you get to where she just said, you don't do that and you just take it as a win. I see people talking about practicing too. You know what?
Practicing
Honestly,
is great.
yeah, you're gonna get this video, you're gonna get the slides. So like have a little get together with some girlfriends and like someone play the other side. Like practice. It does make you I will say that in the 5 years or whatever how long it's been now that I've been working with Red Wine and Blue, like I do feel so much more confident in these conversations. It's because I've heard Just talk like 30 times now. So it does take practice. So, you can do it. A couple more things, and then we're going to bring Julie up to get the questions that are being dropped in the chat. How do you gracefully exit? So like you're having the conversation, you thought it was going well, and then it just goes boom. Um, how would you gracefully exit a conversation that's turning bad?
I actually saw a really good compilation on TikTok of like white people when they realize something racist is being said, just kind of going whoop and like moving, and like we all had the same sort of like little. So yeah, that happens sometimes. I think it depends on what kind of conversation you're having. You can always, it's the same as any social situation. You can always gracefully say, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this with me, but my phone is ringing. I smell smoke from inside. I suddenly realized my dog needs to go out. Um, if you're in public, I think, like, do you want to gracefully exit or do you want to gracefully shut it down? Gracefully exiting, I would just thank the person for their time, say that it's been a really enlightening conversation for you, and then, beg off to do something else. If you're gracefully shutting it down, then I think, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me, but I simply do not share your values. If you've got to go there, you've got to go there, especially if you're in public. And then walk away. You're not gonna say, I don't share your values, and then stand there and wait for a reaction so that now you can be in a back and forth. The point is to get you out of that situation, and into a glass of wine or a bubble bath or whatever it is you need to like refresh and retain your mental health, because that is the most significant resource here.
All right, last question, and then we're going to go to the chat for the questions that are being dropped. Somebody asked about workplace. So it's fine when you're out talking to a neighbor in the yard or you got a friend who family member. What about when this stuff comes up at work? Because it happens. We have people who are of different political views, different values. Also, you have the dynamics of like managers and people who have some power over you. How any suggestions or advice in engaging in these conversations and work, like whether you should bring it up yourself or just what to do when that awkward thing happens.
I would not bring it up myself. I think the first rule at work is protect your job, unless something so egregious is happening that you are no longer willing to be there. And in that case, like, shoot me an email. Let's talk about how to productively burn it down. That sounds great. But if this is a job that you want to retain, I think don't don't instigate those conversations. Um, when you hear them, get personal. So if somebody says something disparaging about a trans person or a gay person in front of you, saying real fast, you know, I have you know, my best friend's kid is trans, and I just it really does a mama bear thing for me when I hear that. I really just I so believe that everybody deserves to be treated with respect. So I would appreciate that not happening around me. Um, I think that's really important. I think it's very important to stand up when you hear bigotry, even if it's in a workplace. If it's your manager, I'm not telling you you have to do this to be a morally right person. If it's if you're worried it's gonna no, I won't be mad at you if you stay quiet because you think it's gonna cost you your job. There are if it is somebody higher up, I would consider talking to HR. If it's somebody who is creating, like, they're, you know, they're sending around donation links or they're regularly using hate speech, I would definitely consider escalating that as a problem. But I do think the one where you really want to speak up, if at all possible, is if you hear, you know, bigoted or racist or homophobic comments, because it's just so important to, like, you won't be the only one in the room that feels that way. You might be the only one brave enough to speak up. And if you do it by citing something personal, even if you're making it up, you know, by citing something personal, you know, I really just believe so deeply that everybody deserves to be treated with respect. I have a really hard time when I hear things like that. So I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah. For sure. All right, Julie Collins, if you want to turn on your camera, I'm going to spotlight you and we will bring you up and get to the questions that are in the chat.
At one point, there were 100 questions, or 100, 117 or something. I've been back and forth between the two places. I've done my best, y'all. Give me some grace a little bit. How do you discuss trans in sports? Because there was a lot of
Yeah.
question about that. Knowing that they're, you know,
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
small
Yeah.
in number, but this has been conflated so big.
Look, I think there are a few ways to get at this. There's actually been a bunch of research into how to have this conversation. So one thing is to if you're going to find common ground on it, is like, look, these conversations are actually happening at the highest levels of sports authorities. Like, we're talking about the Olympics, and that's where they belong. Like, I'm fine having that conversation in the same space that discusses Michael Phelps having webbed feet. Like, bodies are odd and we're all
Mhm.
very different, and some things give us an advantage, and a sports authority might want to talk about that. Cool. We're talking about schools. And the most important thing to remember is that at that age, sports are about teamwork. They're about building resilience. They're about teaching self-confidence. They're about exercise and physical fitness. That's what elementary school sports are. And so to target one or two kids, to the detriment of everybody else being able to do that, is just, is just really sad. The other thing to remind people of is that at that age, at that elementary, middle school, even high school age, kids are all over the place. Like, we do not make the tall girl play with the boys in 6th grade, and we do not make the short boys play with the girls in high school because they haven't had puberty yet. That's just not how that works. So again, going after one or two kids in an entire state, for this one particular reason, makes absolutely no sense, and it just hurts everybody. So I think, there are more laws on the books than there are trans kids playing sports. There's a law in Alabama that applies to a single student. Reminding people that the point of school sports, right, it's teamwork. Sorry, I should back up. First, if you really care about this conversation at the highest levels of athleticism, those sports authorities are having them. Cool. School sports are about teamwork. Kids' bodies are all over the place at that age. Um, and this is, it's hurting every kid by attacking one or two. There is a very small number of kids who are trans, and an even smaller number of kids who are trans who are playing school sports. But there are proposed laws on the books that every girl needs to have a body inspection before they play sports in order to weed out the trans girls. So, like, they're
Horrifying.
attacking a minority and hurting everybody in the process. And that is something that we have to be talking about. It's so gross. It's so gross that you actually can't say what it is, because if you do, you wind up turning off your audience. Like, I won't use the phrase genital inspection, even though that is what we're discussing here. And I urge you not to either. I would say body inspection if you're going to talk about it, and you should talk about it, especially if you're in Ohio or one of the other states that has this. Sharing that is important, but if you get too graphic, you wind up making the person you're talking to just sort of shut down, which is why I said body inspection. So yeah, school sports are not about that. Highest levels of sports authorities are talking about it, and we cannot attack two kids and hurt everybody else in the process.
So,
And Jackie, no, they're not doing.
how do we do not repeating with issues like 50% tariffs on Canadian aluminum or transgender mice?
Transgender mice, right? Yeah, yeah. See, some of the disinformation is like, it's fun, like.
And somebody asked, well, what about when it's like a joke,
Right. No, because I don't want to be talking, like, even if I can make all, like, how much fun did we have when Alex Jones said that rain was making the frogs gay, right? Like, I loved that. That was great. Like, I can talk about the transgender mice. It's actually hilarious. It was supposed to be transgenic mice, which is a
Right.
thing that they do to make them more able to be applicable to human genomes, whatever. And they got the word wrong. But that was just like 2 minutes that I wasn't talking about kids in schools and communities. So when we focus on the disinfo, even when it is fun like that, we're being distracted. We are doing what they want. If I can get the Republican operative on the phone to laugh with me about whatever crazy thing the liberals are doing, like, that, I'm distracting them. And that's what's happening here. You'll notice, I mean, you probably already have, because he's been in our lives for some time, that when Donald Trump does something that is truly like constitutional crisis, like, supporting Putin or something, he will often then say something absolutely ludicrous and completely different, like, totally off topic, like, immediately, knowing that we are gonna take that bait and we are gonna talk about the crazy thing that he said, as opposed to, oh no, Europe is alone in the world standing up to Russia. Or, Elon Musk is looting our government, or anything like that. Like, it is a lot easier to talk about the and more fun to talk about the transgender mice. I fully get it. But don't, just let it go.
What do you do if somebody uses demeaning language? So they were at a school board meeting and someone, I don't even want to repeat it, but someone called children a horrid name. So what do you do when someone is doing something like that?
I think that goes back to the workplace thing. You just say, I'm sorry. I think it is so important that we treat everybody with respect. I can't be in a room with that. Or that's just absolutely, I know that I'm not alone when I say that that's just appalling, and we're just not going to talk to people like that. Everybody deserves to be treated with respect is a pretty good blanket thing that you can say to get everybody on your side. I use it sometimes when I worry I'm gonna get sucked into a conversation with somebody who I would classify like as the opposition. Um, because sometimes it happens. Like, people know what I do for a living, and so, if I'm in a setting and someone's uncle thinks it would be fun to like debate me, and like, I don't want to spend my time doing that, but cool, here we are. I will start that conversation by saying, you and I probably agree on a lot. Let's just start with everybody deserves to be treated with respect, right? They will say yes. And then they're mine. No, they will say yes. And then we are having a very frustratingly productive conversation, and they grow bored because I'm not fighting. We're talking about how to best treat people with respect, since we both agree on that. And I will keep going back to the fact that we both agree on that. So I would use that one liberally.
There's three things that are kind of ish related. Somebody wanted to know how do they get their MAGA relatives or to know that they're being harmed. But then how do you light a fire under people who are on our side that aren't doing anything? And how do you get the men involved?
Whew, yeah. Seriously. Okay. MAGA relatives, be a space for them to ask questions, be a non-judgmental space. If you can't do this, just leave it alone. Like they know your feelings. I'm sure you've made your feelings known to them. If you can engage them in trying to find out why they believe what they believe, do not go in with an agenda at all. You are not there to do anything other than learn. You're just going to ask them questions about their values and their beliefs, and you're going to be respectful, and you're going to thank them for their time and see if they can maybe talk about something else later. Like, can we leave the door open for this later? Over the course of years, this will be a space that they feel comfortable questioning things. And if you are very lucky and very determined, and you bring a lot of love for this person, you might get them to the space where they're saying that they've always agreed with you. And you will swallow everything and say, it's so nice to have you. That's really the only way. It takes a very long time. Look into cult deprogramming. Honestly, it's the closest thing to this work. It's very difficult. And good luck. How do we get people who are on our side but aren't doing anything? This, I think, is the big like sleeping giant of America. Like, we think of our country as 50-50, and we're not. We're basically 3/3, and 1/3 doesn't do anything. But we can tell that they agree with us, and we can tell because of, culture. We can tell because all the things that makes the extremists so mad. Women's magazines are like openly pro-repro. That didn't used to be. You can have gay characters on TV. That didn't gay kissing, like that wasn't a thing when I was a teenager even. So like, we can tell that we've won the culture war, and the reason why we can tell is that third that's not doing anything. So making it relevant to them. I had a lot of conversations last year about folks who didn't want to vote on the presidential level, and I would say, cool, I'm not going to try to change your mind on that. I want to talk to you about school board, and I want to talk to you about the state legislature. And I had some really productive conversations that way. So make it about them, make it local. And how do we get the men involved? We have a lot of really great men, honestly, just not nearly enough of them. And I'm sure there are a few on this call right now. We need you to get loud in other spaces. Like, it is at this point the case where if you're a man, you are likely to be a Trump voter. Like, like that's statistically. So the only people who those guys are listening to are other men. And so when you know that everybody deserves to be treated with respect, and that we shouldn't be bullying trans kids, and that women are whole people who deserve to have whole person autonomy, we really need you to say that at the gym, and at the game, and at your buddy's house, and it's, yeah, like that's how we get the men. We get the men with the men that we already have. And I'm sorry to put it on you, but I'm really glad that you're here, and just get loud.
So there is also a lady from Canada here on the call tonight, and she wants to know, how do we or how do they tackle this targeted disinformation that is happening, because there have been a lot of disinformation spread about Canadians.
Oh man, yeah. Start by letting people know that there's bad information out there. Even saying pre-bunking is a good thing. You know how like talking about strategy is an important way to get rid of to combat disinformation. People are doing this because that means you can pre-bunk as much as you can debunk. So saying on the group chat, hey, there's a lot of really bad information out there right now about Canada. Please, do extra research and double check your sources. Feel free to shoot me a note if you see something you think might not be real. I'm happy to do the research for you. Letting people know that they are likely to be targeted by this stuff really helps when they hear it, to just have that extra level of skepticism. So just talking about the fact that it is happening without talking about the specifics. I'm not saying what I'm hearing about Canada. I'm just saying there's a lot of stuff going on right now about Canada, and you might hear some stuff that's not true.
Well, I know
Also,
that
we
we
love
are,
Canada.
yeah, we do.
Like, sorry, Canada.
So I know that we're at time. I know Julie's coming back. Julie, one question that I wanted to give to you is folks want to know if we can have our shareable stuff be available to be shared on Blue Sky and Substack.
Okay, we are on Substack and we are on Blue Sky. So if you are not following us, you can go check it out. We purposely put certain things on certain platforms based on audience, based on who's seeing it. So you can always go to our website and find a whole bunch of other information as well. So redwine.blue is our website. Um, I want to answer a couple other things. I will send out the Justice slides with the sources for the data. I will give you the link to our events page. You can find all of those events we listed there. I will send out check your inbox right now for an email about sharing out about the Department of Education. I also saw somebody in the chat asking about men coming to our events and, are we an organization for women? Yes, we are a women-centered, women-led organization. So a lot of what we do is talking to women about issues. That does not mean that men cannot come to these events. We want you to learn how to talk to people. We want you to do the things that just said. We want you to get that messaging. We want you to be educated on the issues. So yes, please feel free. Just we always recognize that not every group is for every person. And like I said, we are a women-centered group, but we want everybody doing this work because it's going to take all of us to make a difference. So we appreciate you all being here, especially the dudes who want to use their voice and stand up. We totally appreciate you. So I thank you so much for this really amazing conversation, for the questions you submitted, for the questions in the chat right now. And we hope to see you again later in the week. Come see us on Thursday night. Learn about TradWise. If you haven't heard that expression before, come check it out. And everybody have a really great evening. Good night, all.